We've seen a lot of good wedge players this week. Luke Donald's been in, one of the best in the world. Ben Griffin, phenomenal wedge player. Keith Mitchell, great wedge player. Jim Herman, really good wedge player. We've been watching a lot of what they do. The common things I keep hearing from them are utilizing the bounce, understanding the design of the wedge and letting it do what it's supposed to do. So understanding why you have certain grinds, how you like to play certain shots, and ultimately it's where you position your hands and the wedge to make sure that that sole is going to do what it's supposed to do. Fundamentally, we're all just trying to get the ball closer to the hole. So it comes down to a little bit of a preference in terms of how you like to play shots. Stephen Fisk is an example of a player that we have out here that we've been doing a lot of testing with, who he plays a little bit more of a lower game, a little bit more low ball flight. His hand position is a little bit different than Luke Donald's hand position. Luke is one that can play one more up in the air. So it's interesting to see how they selected their wedges, selected their grinds and bounces based off of their playing styles. The fun way to test these wedges, honestly, I've got 5 different grinds here. I'm gonna go through each one of these and hit them and kind of do some things to show what the grind will actually do performance-wise. So I always like to start with kind of the fullest sole wedge. That's the S grind. Now, this is for that one that's gonna expose the most amount of sole, expose the most bounce. There's, I'd say, a little bit less maneuverability with this one, so it doesn't quite open up as nicely as some of the others. But for someone who likes to play a more square club face, this is a great wedge. I'd honestly say this is like the most forgiving sole, if you want to say that. Meaning, because it's got all that bounce exposed, you can get away with a lot more. The wedge won't dig, the wedge will glide really nicely. You'll see the S grind live a lot more on the stronger lofted and honestly the higher bounce wedges because of what the S grind leads itself to. It's more for a square face design. So when you're impacting it with the leading edge kind of square to the target. So because of that, yeah, you see it a lot on the pitching wedges, the gap wedges, and the higher bounced wedges. All that to say, I mean, it still glides really nicely through the turf. But if you were to come up just a little bit heavy on this one, kind of drag it a little bit behind, yeah, zero grab whatsoever, because that S grind allows it to glide nicely across the turf. If there's a downside to the S grind, honestly, it's when you're trying to manipulate it. If you're a player who really opens the face a lot, when you expose all that sole with the S grind, you don't shave as much off, that leading edge is going to lift a little bit higher. So this S grind, if I were to open it wide, that leading edge sits a little bit higher than I'm comfortable with. So to me, I like to play this one with a little bit more of a square face, a little bit more of a descending angle. An interesting difference between an iron and a wedge is how the grooves are applied. On an iron, they're actually forged in. The point of the groove on the iron is to help really just move debris out of the way. On a wedge, you're talking more about how do you get that groove to engage? How do you get it to grab the ball? So with a wedge, we actually mill those grooves in. So we go in and use what we call our quad cut grooves, our quad cut plus on these, and that's how we specifically control the shoulder radius, the volume, the depth, and the pitch of each one. And raw is always a discussion point about the groove. Does the raw grab more? Does the raw grab less or something? Honestly, what a plating does, a plating is a dipping of the material into, the plating, and it's going to adhere. So in general, a raw has the ability to potentially spin a little bit more. However, that shoulder isn't protected by that plating. So honestly, a raw will wear quicker as well. So right out of the wrapper, a raw may spin a touch more, but over the life of it, the raw may actually spin a touch less. So again, it's all about how often are you going to change your wedges out? How often are you, trying to get maximum spin, or how often are you looking for consistency of spin? Honestly, if you're a tour player and you're someone switching your wedges out every couple of tournaments, I understand the use of the raw. So I've been pitching a lot of them with this S grind. For this one, for this short pin, actually, I'd like to be able to open the wedge up a little bit more. So to me, I'm actually now going to switch over to a C grind. So the C grind is probably the next more aggressive grind after the S. The C is literally for almost like the crescent shape that you see. So there's a little bit more trailing edge relief, and there's more toe and heel relief. What that's going to do is going to allow you to manipulate that face angle a little bit more. So when I sit this down compared to the previous, it sits lower. When I open that face, I can see that leading edge is lower to the ground, which is going to allow me to kind of sweep under that ball a little bit easier. So here I can actually do a little bit more, and let's see how this works. So there I could take a little bit more aggressive swipe at it because I know that grind is removing some of that material. With that more aggressive swing, I can be a little bit faster through impact and give that little bit low grabby shot that I was looking for. The playability of a sole almost depends on 3 different things. There's bounce, there's grind, and there's sole width. You know, the bounce itself is literally, it's a measurement. It's how much does that sole kick up like this. That's going to ultimately determine how much the club wants to dig or not dig. That dig portion of it, it kind of depends on your, I wouldn't say your ability, but your technique. If you're a player who likes to come steep, or your technique is a little bit steeper where the club's going to grab into the ground, more bounce is your friend. If you're a player who's very sweepy, who has a low angle of attack, less bounce you can get away with. But ultimately, bounce is your friend, because if you play here and expose that bounce, it'll allow you to get away with a lot more. So bounce, honestly, it's a good thing. From there, there's sole grind. Sole grind is what do you do with that afterwards? What do you do with the bounce? And where does that bounce live on the wedge? So while that angle kicks up here, the sole grind is going to talk about how much you then remove on the peripheral, like how much across the trailing edge, how much across the toe, how much across the back. So our grinds, we have an S, a C, a D, an X, and a V. And each one of those removes a little bit different amount in a different place. Each of those will determine, you know, how aggressive you like to open the face and manipulate it. And then the last is sole width. You know, sole width will play a role in it as well, because sole width just exposes more of that bounce as well. So if you have a wider sole with a less aggressive grind, that bounce is going to be more kind of in your face. It's going to play a little bit more. However, you get a little bit narrower, it's going to make it play effectively like a little bit less grind. I was hitting the S grind, I've been hitting the C grind, and actually I kind of forgot about the one in between. This is the D grind right here. The D grind is nice because similar to that S with a square club face, it still leaves a lot of bounce in the middle. So this is one that works really well for a square face, but also removes some material on the heel side as well. So this is a nice option for a player who doesn't manipulate it too much, but likes to get just a little bit of open face. So you can kind of see on that one, I didn't open it quite as much, so the ball still kind of got a little bit higher off of it. So I wasn't able to go quite as aggressively through it as I would if I were to go to, say, a C grind. If I pull this one, a little bit more relief off that heel, open this one up a little bit more. That was nice because that really got fast under the ball. So with that C grind, you can really do that. You can get quick, keep your hands low, and just let the club do the work. Slides really nicely under the ball. If you're talking kind of levels of aggression on the grind, I had the S, then the D, then the C. Now I'm actually gonna go to the X grind. X grind being the most aggressive. When I say most aggressive, that means I've taken the most out of the toe, taken the most out of the heel, the most out of the trailing edge. So this is one that sits extremely low to the ground. So honestly, it plays like very little bounce. So with this X grind, I mean, I can really open that up and it sits very, very low. I can get fast through it. With the X grind, you can really get through it a lot. So the X grind, it's a fast wedge. It's for a player who likes to manipulate a lot. So, you know, with the toe relief, you see a lot of better players, and not necessarily off this lie, but on a little bit thicker lie, get that shaft lean up and be able to utilize that toe relief to keep that leading edge low. It's got a lot on the trailing edge if you want to just open it up, and it's got a lot of heel relief too, so you don't get much grab. So the X grind is the one that honestly, it's got the most versatility, but it does that with the least amount of bounce exposed. So you kind of need to know what you're doing a little bit more with the X grind. Really allows you to slide under it quickly though. For me personally, the wedge that I use on my higher loft or on my 58, this is actually my gamer V grind. The V grind is a newer one for us. And this is something that I've been really excited to have in the bag because honestly, I've always played a wedge for the last couple generations that has a little, not quite enough bounce for me. I've played a 5808 and this is a 5810. I've needed a little bit more bounce, but the reason I've gone away from it and played that 08 is because I do like to manipulate it. I do like to open it up. So the beauty of the V grind is it exposes more bounce on the front and then just really aggressively cuts off the back. So this is one that you can get away with more with a square face, but you can still open it up and it sits flat. So square face wise, sits nice, allows me to hit the normal shot and utilize the bounce, which I love. You know, to be able to hit just a normal shot using the bounce is really valuable. But when you get into situations like we are here with a tighter lie, to be able to open it up, if you have too much bounce, it gets difficult. So that V grind really allows you to sit this flat, that leading edge sits low, and you can get fast through the ball again. So to me, that's the most versatile of them. With this 54S grind, I've talked a little bit about the groove configuration itself. The Quad Cut Plus grooves, you actually have a few more grooves on it. This one has 17 grooves on it, where previous generations only had 15 or 16 grooves on it. The reason for that is because we wanted to put them a little bit tighter together. However, when I get to my 58 degree, there's fewer grooves. And I know that sounds kind of backwards. The stronger lofted has more, the weaker lofted has fewer. The reason is because when you get a 58 degree, when you get something with that grind that you're opening up, that you're hitting a lot of different shots with, if that groove is narrow, then you're opening the face, then the ball's gonna slide more. So you need that added width of the groove to make sure that shoulder can grab. So that's the beauty of this, is this one actually only has 15 grooves. It's fewer grooves, but each groove is doing that much more. The development of the groove has been really fun because there's so many different shots that a wedge hits. So we do robotic testing, we do player testing, we do wet, dry conditions, we do tour conditions, we do the rough, we do square face, open face, and a variety of different lofts. So there's a ton of different variables that go into it, just because that's what wedges are for. A lot of different shots, a lot of different lengths. So with that, what the testing has shown over and over again is that when that face is more square, you need more grooves. You need more opportunity for that debris to get out of the way. But when you start doing things with it, as soon as that face starts to open some, then all of a sudden you need that shoulder to engage. To engage that shoulder, you need width. And with width comes volume, and with volume comes fewer grooves, but bigger grooves. Honestly, there's no right or wrong with wedges. It's what style do you bring to the table? And that's why it's so necessary to have 5 different grinds, a ton of different bounce options, because you need to find the one that fits your style.